Hello everyone. Today I am talking about something relating to soldier, or soldiers plural. And this is actually a re-recording of something that I was talking about double soldier sacks, which I will touch on, of course. I want to include those. But the issue I had was it was kind of just too focused, where I only had a couple things to say, like this is what it looks like, this is, you know, the positives and negatives, and then just repeating myself for 5 minutes after that. So I figure a better topic would be to focus in on soldier coordination in general, because that encompasses far more things and is a much more helpful metric, I think. So we're going to talk about soldier coordination. For starters, I mean, just as soldiers, coordinating is extremely important for a multitude of reasons. And I mean, the big ones just being that, you know, let's provide a concrete example. So on a last hold, your soldiers are the players that are primarily in charge of stopping the point, usually once those traps are dead, as actually you see an example here. But the soldiers usually give up some health in order to do so, and soldier as a class is kind of just the trade health for some form of value, whether that be space or damage or etc. So yeah, you usually give up some health to do so. And if both your soldiers are bombing the point at the same time, then they're both losing really valuable health, and you might be in a position where you have one fewer point stop than you would need or want. You know, in the example of, well, basically just you're converting that health to stopping the point simultaneously, so that's one fewer stop, because now the soldier that could have just been waiting and baiting and preserving their health is now in a position where they're too weak to effectively stop the point, right? So communicating in order to avoid a situation like that is really important, as well as on the flip side. If each soldier assumes the other one is going first, then suddenly we're in a position where the point just gets capped before a soldier can respond. So that's just one example of where soldiers communicating and working together is really important. The other one's just like selecting doors. You don't really want your soldiers going through the same doors and routing the same way. You would want more map control kind of spread out across your soldiers. And the other one is just coordinating bombs. Like if one of the soldiers does a ton of damage on their bomb, then the other one might be inclined to then bomb those same targets to clean them up. And that's something we'll touch on. Actually, no, we can just talk about it right now. Because when it comes to soldier, it's a class that's fantastic at securing damage on players, and as a result, like, it's a fantastic class at creating damage, I should say, because you can bomb aggressively and then just die while going out like a firework, just dealing a shit ton of damage to everyone, right? But it's also a really good class at securing picks. If someone's really weak on the other side of the map or something, or just wherever, while scouts are good cleanup classes, it's hard for a scout to confirm a kill in the same way that a soldier can, where a scout kind of needs to be positioned well, whereas a soldier can just bomb that target, and then it's an easy, like, one rocket cleanup a lot of the time. So, with that in mind, another thing as well is that soldiers thrive when players aren't looking at them, and bombs are very successful when people aren't expecting a bomb. So with those three things in mind, when you look at a soldier, one of the best classes at enabling a soldier is another soldier, because a soldier can create a lot of damage that another soldier can follow up on. A soldier can be bombing and distracting for another soldier to bomb and commit. And what was the third one? A soldier can be... We talked about the damage. We talked about the looking at players. Man, I'm totally blanking on the third thing. Unless the 3 that I was talking about was securing damage and creating that damage. Am I think I might be lost. It'll come back to me. But you can see this dynamic that soldiers are fantastic enablers for other soldiers. And just creating these opportunities for other soldiers to thrive off of. So soldiers working together and communicating is a good way for them to be overall more successful, right? So of course soldier communication and coordination is a really, really important thing. And when soldiers play together, suddenly one soldier takes a fight, and you know when you take like a 1v1 soldier, I mean you can get a lot of damage on the player, but like you only have so many rockets loaded, so it's difficult to maybe confirm that kill, and of course they're playing around the fact that you have like very little ammo loaded, but with that in mind, I mean if there's just another soldier to jump away, then boom, that's suddenly just an easy kill that you have confirmed. So yeah, it's important in that respect. And also with regards to like the low ammo count for soldier, that is a big deal, and that means that, you know, utilizing two soldiers effectively increases the potential damage output immensely. Where, you know, one soldier bomb on a buffed team getting through a doorway is gonna do a lot of damage, but probably not get any kills. It's probably just gonna like get rid of their buffs, maybe dip into the health pool a bit. But a double soldier bomb, and boom, that full buff team could just wipe. So it does drastically increase the damage output. So yeah. Next, I think I'll talk about soldiers in a sacking context and coordination there, because it is important. So when it comes to a kind of sacking situation, sacking protocol, there are kind of standard setups and standard amounts of players that teams will sack into points. But that's not a hard and fast rule. And with any point in the game, sacking is a trade-off of how much you're willing to give up versus how high return rate you want with that sack, basically. You know, you're dealing with a slider for how much aggression you want in your sack versus how high of a success rate you want with it. Success rate being forcing the Uber, right? Because take a point like Snakewater second, for instance, and sacking into that point when you have control of mid. It's a point that a lot of teams will just comfortably single sack into. And there's very little risk associated with that. It's very difficult to counter sack out of Snakewater second. So you're not really giving up much by single sacking a soldier. You are not super likely to get the force necessarily, but you are extremely unlikely to lose mid or get forced to the counter sack. Versus a lot of teams do like double sacking into Snakewater second, where you also lose a scout in the process. And that, of course, increases your odds of, you know, having the successful sack and getting that force. But the counter sack becomes a lot scarier because, oh, that was so unfortunate. The counter sack becomes a lot more difficult to deal with because that's just one fewer player that can deny a soldier bomb. That's just one fewer scout that can be spotting a doorway, identifying where they're going and whatnot. So the pressure is going to be a little harder to deal with, right? And if you were really crazy, I mean, you could triple sack into Snakewater second if you wanted. Again, it's all about that slider, that risk reward, because you can sack any number of players into any number of points. And of course, for most points, there are like kind of a happy medium. And a lot of teams are perfectly fine just single sacking into every point except last, which you double sack into. But I want to talk about another strategy that has some potential, and that is the double soldier sack. So which classes you sack matters a lot, because there's not only consideration for how successful they are as a sacking class, but there's also maybe more consideration for how they are as a defending class for that counter sack pressure once you lose the player and the other team has that small player advantage to potentially pressure off of. and that matters a lot. That is why you don't see demo sacks very often. It's because demo is just such a extremely valuable class to have defensively that even though, in my opinion, demo is a fantastic class at sacking, it's still not a class you want to sack a lot of the time because, you know, you don't want to give up that absolutely wonderful defensive capability of stickies and pipes and whatnot. So that's something to consider. And when it comes to soldiers, I mean, soldiers are way, way better at holding doorways than scouts are. Like, it's not even close. Scouts don't even really hold doorways. So, usually with a double sack protocol, you are sacking a soldier and a scout. A soldier because you can afford to lose a soldier, typically, if you have a soldier. And usually, for most points, teams are comfortable enough holding with just a soldier and a demo as your spam classes. But, I mean, if you want to include someone else, then a scout is fine. It's less so because scouts are good at sacking, because they're honestly kind of tough or bad at sacking. You just need the door to not be watched. That guy was just out of my vision. You need the door to not be watched. But it's serviceable, right? And threatening that hit scan is, you know, there's something to be said about that. Like a medic that's on 20 HP is probably just gonna have to use if there's a scout through a door. But it is largely a decision made with consideration to the defensive capabilities. Because when you lose 2 soldiers, then you are way, way more vulnerable in the countersack. However, you know, there's still a place for that potentially. Because if you are choosing to double soldier sack, then your chances of getting that force are much, much higher because you are very likely to overwhelm the scouts, especially in like certain holds. If it's, for example, like a process second, which is a nice point to double soldier sack into, then their flank scout is not even guaranteed to be on top of the height, ready to deny soldiers. It might just be one pocket scout, which would absolutely get overwhelmed by 2 soldiers bombing in. And that could be very effective. And in my opinion, if you get the force with the double soldier sack, then you don't even really have to worry about the counter sack that much, because even down those 2 soldiers, if you're like, the other team has to be so careful, because if they commit their heals forward at all, like even 2 choke to pressure it, then you can just Uber into them with your ad. So it's a very prickly situation for the team that got forced. And like, forget if you get a drop, which a lot of the time a drop is just kind of a medic's fault. Sometimes it is. In the case of like a sack, a lot of the time it is. Or just, it's at least like a judgment call. But if one soldier is very obviously committing and then shortly thereafter another soldier's committing, not everyone's going to be staring at that second soldier. And the med might not even know they're there. They might know that the soldier's sacking, like, sure, he hit you for 100 damage, but he shot all 3 rockets that he had loaded, so he's going to die before he reloads this next block rocket. Oh, and there's another soldier, and I've dropped Uber. So drops are not even out of the question with double soldier sacks. And if you drop the medic and not force, then forget about any counter pressure. Like, that is just off the table. So, oh, is this... I think this half might be ending soon, but whatever. So yeah, that's another thing. So it's really the only situation in which you're really exceptionally vulnerable down those 2 soldiers is if the double soldier sack fails to work at all and does not get the force and doesn't get any picks in the process, which again, the damage output of 2 soldiers bombing is really high. So it's not out of the question to be killing those players, like for example, like a pocket scout or something. If he's standing on the height and you are able to splash him, med's out of reach or something, then yeah, he's probably gonna die. And a team that is down a player against 2 soldiers, or a team that's down 2 soldiers, is a lot less willing to maybe pressure out, or their pressure out is not going to be as successful, right? Is kind of the cliff notes of it. Another thing I should mention, and I should have mentioned this before mentioning sacking both soldiers, is that soldier coordination during sacks is absolutely important, regardless. And soldier activity is absolutely important, regardless. Okay, yeah, this is ending. Let's load another demo real quick. How about a... What are the odds? We'll do a metalworks. What are the odds that this is just a soldier half? Very unlikely. So soldier activity during sacks is really nice. Oh my god, it is a soldier. It's really, really nice to have because, I mean, at a baseline level, like, for all the same reasons I already talked about, how soldiers enable each other and soldier activity enables each other. Having the soldier who's not trying to sack bomb in as if they are and then fade back to safety, you know, converting that health effectively for a distraction. Well, with a situation like that, suddenly there's going to be more players looking at that player, and your odds of getting a successful sack off from that second bomb shortly thereafter is increased. And so being like very active with both your soldiers is something you can already kind of be used to, especially on points like a process. Honestly, a metalworks, it works fine as well because there's plenty of fade opportunities from a high bomb alley. And this creates an interesting kind of dynamic where you can very much be bluffing this double soldier sack and forcing so much attention from the other team that not only is your pressure going to be better, but your bomb is likely to be better because now there's two soldiers to take care of. And then if you want to do that risky double soldier sack, you can just do that. It's literally as simple as just have one of your soldiers commit. I think I would have lived there if we had the gunboats plug-in, actually. I'm pretty sure that rocket hit the other soldier and got me killed. Interesting thought. But yeah, it's something that you can easily work in, right? So yeah, I know Goblin Zone actually in the past. I think during their second place advanced season, they love playing process all the time, but into process second, a double soldier sack would be their default plan, and a lot of the time it just worked because sure, you're losing two soldiers, and you really like to have two soldiers for counter sack. But it's not the end of the world if you're getting that force. And a lot of the time you get that force as well because, I mean, it's just a difficult thing to deal with for the other team. So yeah, that's probably all I have to talk about soldier coordination. Soldiers as classes, or soldier as a class is uniquely equipped to enable himself, or rather another soldier, which is really interesting. So that coordination is extremely important for not just coordinating spam on doors and making sure everything's held defensively, for not just coordinating bomb targets on a mid-fight or something to that effect, for not just all these reasons, but it's, oh, look at that. The med had no idea there was another soldier in and ends up dropping Uber, even though my bomb is complete trash, just because I'm the distraction. Perfect example right there of soldiers enabling other soldiers. So that soldier coordination is extremely important. Communicating is extremely important because that's how you are the most successful in the class. On top of the fact that you're the most useful assets for your team for reasons like holding those doors that I was just mentioning, as well as, you know, making sure that you optimize who's stopping the point on last, as I talked about earlier, for stuff like that. On top of the fact that another big thing I should have mentioned is that while it is the roamer who's sacking and counter-sacking by default, they are not always in a position to sack or counter-sack. And what am I doing? And a lot of the time, a roamer might just happen to take a bunch of damage before sacking, and they're not healthy for it, or their door is just being thoroughly watched by a scout or something, and they aren't able to get through. And in cases like that, if they communicate early enough that they cannot sack, then the pocket can sack. And then you actually are able to sack. Well, this is more of a counter sack thing, because when you're sacking, you control a pace, and you can just get that roamer buffed up if you'd like. But there might be cases you wouldn't want to, you know, if you have a pick or something. Your roamer took a scrappy fight on the flank that got you guys a pick, and you want to be like getting through now or something, then by all means you might not have time to heal that guy up. So communicating who can go and who can't, as well as communicating like when they're ready to bomb on mids, all these things, because your soldiers need to be coordinated, so they need to communicate. It just makes each soldier far more effective. But anyway, I think that's all I have to talk about the topic. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you next time.